I came home from the hospital weak and dizzy, expecting to lie down in my own bed. Instead, I found a plush dog mattress in its place. My clothes were in garbage bags by the garage door. My son looked me in the eye and said, "Don't be upset, Mom. Max needs the space more than you do. Max is their Labrador." My room, the one I nursed my dying husband in, was now a dog's den. And in that moment, standing in my hallway like a stranger, I realized something I never thought I'd feel. I wasn't family anymore. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when that house felt sacred. When every creak in the floorboards carried a memory, not a warning. My husband, Harold, and I moved into it the year our son Dean turned 3. We'd saved every penny we had. I remember carrying Dean in one arm and a paint bucket in the other while Harold joked about our castle. It was a modest place, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, nothing fancy. But it was ours. Ours to build, to protect, to grow old in. Harold passed away when Dean was only 15. Cancer. Quick, cruel. I watched the man I loved wither in that bedroom. He made me promise to keep the house no matter what. "This is where our love lives," he whispered the night before he died. I didn't cry then. I waited until Dean fell asleep and sobbed into Harold's pillow until morning. After Harold's passing, Dean and I became inseparable. I didn't have much time to grieve. I had to keep working. I took extra hours at the bakery and cleaned houses on weekends. Dean never lacked for anything. New school shoes, class trips, birthday parties, I made it happen, even if it meant skipping my own meals some weeks. He was a good boy back then. Sweet, thoughtful. He'd bring me wildflowers from the park and leave little notes on the kitchen counter. "You're the best, Mom. I love you forever." I saved them in a tin box in my closet. I still have them. When he graduated high school, he looked so proud. "I couldn't have done this without you," he told me, hugging me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. He went off to college just a couple towns over. Every Sunday night he called without fail. We talked about everything: classes, his part-time job, the books he was reading. When he met Amanda, I was the first to know. "She's smart, Mom. And driven. You'll love her." I remember laughing and saying, "Well, as long as she doesn't mind an overprotective mother." I didn't expect that joke to sour over time. Amanda was polite, reserved. She brought flowers the first time they visited and helped clean up after dinner. But there was something behind her eyes, something calculating. She never called me Mom, never hugged me. When I asked about her family, she changed the subject. Over time, her visits grew colder, quieter. And I noticed Dean's tone shift when he spoke to me, like he was trying not to say the wrong thing in front of her. Still, I kept hoping. I told myself it was just growing pains, adapting to adult life, careers, marriage. When they got pregnant with little Sammy, my heart lit up again. A grandson. A new chapter. The day they brought him home, I cooked enough food for a week and cleaned their apartment top to bottom. Amanda barely said thank you, but Dean looked tired and grateful. "You're amazing, Mom," he whispered as he rocked Sammy to sleep. That was enough for me. 2 years later, when they said they were moving in with me just for a little while, I said yes without thinking. Of course I did. That's what mothers do. Dean had lost his job, Amanda's hours were cut, and rent in the city had gone sky high. They needed a lifeline and I had one. I moved my things into the smaller room so they could have the master bedroom. I didn't mind. "It's just temporary," Amanda promised. "Once we get back on our feet, we'll find our own place." That was 5 years ago. First it felt nice. A full house again. Sammy's laughter echoing down the hallway. The smell of fresh-baked cookies and crayons on the coffee table. I made breakfast every morning, watched Sammy while they worked, did the laundry without being asked. I felt useful. Needed. Like a real grandmother. There were even moments, rare but warm, when Amanda seemed to thaw. She once asked for my recipe for chicken pot pie. Another time, she let me hold her hand during a thunderstorm when Dean was away. But those moments never lasted. Her smile always retreated behind those polite eyes. Still, I held on to hope. Because that's what I do. Because I remember the boy who brought me wildflowers. The boy who cried when I scraped my knee in the garden. The boy who said, "I want to buy you a house just like this one when I grow up." But as the years passed, the air changed. My room became the guest room. My name disappeared from the mailbox. Amanda started redecorating, throwing out old things without asking. Just decluttering, she'd say. They got the dog Max last year. I wasn't thrilled, but I didn't say anything. Amanda said it was for Sammy's development. Dean said it was to bring energy into the house. But from the beginning it was Amanda's dog. She fed him organic food, dressed him in little jackets, talked to him like a child. I didn't understand it, but again I stayed silent. Then came the little slights. A missing photo from the hallway. My rocking chair pushed to the garage. My favorite teacups replaced with modern mugs that didn't keep tea warm. Amanda said the house needed a younger touch. Dean just smiled and said nothing. I started feeling like a visitor in my own home. But I told myself it was still mine. I still had the deed. Still had the memories. Still had my bedroom. Until I didn't. It didn't happen overnight. That's the part that still haunts me. It was slow, so slow that I almost missed it entirely. Like a pot left to boil on low. The heat crept in quietly until everything inside had changed. The first sign was the silence. Dean used to talk to me every evening, even if it was just about the weather or what Sammy had done that day. He'd sit on the porch with me, sipping tea, telling stories. But then he started getting too busy. Amanda always had a project. Sammy was tired. Dean had work calls. I found myself sitting alone more and more. The porch swing creaking with no one beside me. Then it was the interruptions. I'd start talking, maybe about a memory, maybe about the grocery list, and Amanda would cut me off. "We don't really eat that anymore, Joe," she'd say, or "I think we're good, thanks." She'd smile when she said it, but it was the kind of smile you give a child who's said something foolish. I remember one afternoon I tried to teach Sammy how to knead dough. I used to bake with Dean when he was little, and I thought maybe it could become our tradition. But halfway through Amanda walked in, took one look at the flour on the counter and said, "Oh no, that's too messy. We're not doing that in here." She scooped Sammy up without a word to me and left me standing there, dough still clinging to my fingers. I laughed it off at the time. Said something like, "She must be tired." But that night I stood in the kitchen and realized she'd thrown out my old rolling pin. The wooden one Harold gave me on our 10th anniversary. The guest room, I still called it my room back then, started to feel smaller. Amanda had stored boxes in the closet, temporarily. Then came the yoga mat. Then the dog crate. Max had his own plush bed in the living room, but apparently, he needed a quiet space to self-regulate. I wasn't sure what that meant, but again I stayed silent. I didn't want to cause waves. Dean barely noticed or pretended not to. If I mentioned anything, he'd chuckle and say, "You know Amanda. She likes things her way." But it wasn't just Amanda. Dean had changed too. There was a distance in his eyes, like he was always looking past me. One evening I walked into the kitchen and heard them whispering. They didn't know I was nearby. Amanda said, "She's too involved. This isn't the 1950s. Parents don't live with their kids forever." Dean mumbled something about boundaries and space. Then Amanda said, "She doesn't even own the house anymore. Technically we do more than she does." I froze in the hallway. What did that even mean? I couldn't bring myself to ask. Instead, I tiptoed back to my room and stared at the ceiling all night. The financial shift came next. Dean had always asked me before using any joint accounts, even though I rarely said no. I trusted him. But suddenly, small amounts began disappearing without explanation. "Just grabbing groceries," he said. "Vet bill for Max," Amanda added. But the receipts never matched. The fridge never had much in it. And Max was healthy as ever. One day I went to refill a prescription and my card declined. I laughed, embarrassed, thinking it was a mistake. But the pharmacist pulled me aside gently and said, "It looks like there's nothing left in that account." That night I asked Dean about it. He didn't even look guilty. "We're all one household, Mom. It's not like we're stealing from you." Amanda chimed in. "It's just redistribution. Like communal living." I stared at them, feeling like I just stepped into a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Redistribution? Communal? I wasn't a stranger off the street. I was the one who kept the lights on when Dean was sick in the 3rd grade, who stayed up knitting blankets to sell at craft fairs, so he could go on the 8th grade science trip. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the realization that they saw me as a burden now, an inconvenience, problem to be managed. I tried talking to Sammy about it. He was only 6 but wise beyond his years. "Granny," he whispered once while we colored at the table. "Mommy says you don't like dogs. But I know you just miss your room." I hugged him so tight he squealed. "That's our secret," I told him. But secrets can't hold back a storm. And I could feel one brewing. Amanda walked around like she already owned the house. Dean stopped calling it Mom's place and started saying our home. I overheard Amanda on the phone telling someone they were finally modernizing the space. The clincher came one Sunday morning. I'd woken up early to make pancakes. It was a tradition, something Harold and I always did after church. Sammy loved them. But as I pulled the pan out, Amanda walked in and said, "Actually, I was going to do brunch today. I already made a reservation." I blinked. "A reservation?" "For the 3 of us," she said. "You can have the leftover cereal." It wasn't the words, really. It was the tone. Like she was talking to a tenant. A guest. A stranger. I sat at the kitchen table alone that morning, watching their car pull out of the driveway. I noticed Max sitting in the front seat, tongue lolling happily, head out the window. They'd brought the dog. Not me. I looked around that quiet kitchen, my kitchen, and realized something terrifying. I was no longer part of their plans. I was just in the way. It happened while I was in the hospital recovering from a mild fall, nothing serious. Just a twisted ankle and a few precautionary tests. They insisted I stay overnight for observation. I didn't argue. Honestly, it felt good to rest somewhere I wasn't in the way. Dean didn't visit. Amanda texted a thumbs-up emoji when I said I was fine. Sammy called once. Bless his heart, whispering into the phone. "Granny, when are you coming back?" 3 days. That's all it was. When I returned, the house was different. Not messy, not chaotic, just wrong. Cold. Quiet. Sterile. I limped inside, leaning on my cane, and immediately noticed the hallway photos were gone. The ones of Harold and me on our wedding day. The ones of Dean in his graduation cap, grinning beside me. Replaced with framed quotes in cursive script. "Live, laugh, love. Pause and reflect." Confused, I called out, "Dean." No answer. I shuffled toward my room, aching to sit down and rest. But the door was wide open, and the moment I stepped inside, my breath caught in my throat. My bed was gone. Gone. In its place, there was a large custom-made dog bed shaped like a bone. Plush, monogrammed, and nestled in the center of the room like a throne. Max's toys were scattered across the floor. His food bowls tucked into the corner where my nightstand used to be. The curtains had been changed. My soft blue ones replaced with some hideous beige paw print pattern. My quilt. My photos. My books. My memories. All gone. I turned around, trembling, heart pounding in my chest. Dean appeared in the hallway holding a takeout bag, casual as if nothing had changed. "Oh hey, you're back. How was the hospital?" he said, stepping past me into the kitchen. I followed, stunned, my voice barely a whisper. "Dean, where's my bed?" He blinked at me, like it hadn't even occurred to him that I'd ask. "Oh, right. We moved your stuff to the guest room." Max was having a hard time sleeping, and Amanda thought he'd do better in a space of his own. He opened the takeout container, sniffed it, then added, "It's better this way, Mom. He needs the space more than you do." I felt the words hit me like a slap. The dog needs the master bedroom more than I do? Dean shrugged. "You said you didn't like the big windows anyway. The guest room's cozier." Cozy. That room had no closet. No heat vent. The bed was a cheap fold-out cot with springs that bit into my back. I had slept in it once when Amanda's parents visited. For 2 nights I'd woken up sore and cold. But my things? I started looking around. Where are they? Amanda walked in then, wearing yoga pants and a smug smile. "We boxed everything. Some of it's in the garage, some we donated. You didn't really need it all, right? Less is more." I stared at her, speechless. She poured herself a smoothie and said, "Honestly, this was overdue. That room was so dated. This house needs a fresh vibe." Dean didn't even defend me. He didn't offer an apology, an explanation, not even a flicker of guilt. "Why didn't you ask me?" I finally managed to whisper. Amanda didn't even look at me. "We didn't think it was a big deal. You were gone, we took the opportunity to get organized. You always say you want us to feel at home." Dean nodded like that settled it. I stood there in my own kitchen feeling like a stranger. I went to the garage. My boxes were stacked in a dark corner, covered in dust. They'd written mom stuff in black marker on the side, like clutter from a yard sale. I opened one and found my wedding album shoved beneath an old dog leash. I sat down right there on the cold concrete and stared at Harold's smiling face, tears stinging my eyes. I whispered, "I'm sorry. I let them take it all." That evening I moved into the guest room. I tried not to cry as I lay on that awful cot. I tried to believe this was temporary, that tomorrow Dean would come in and say it had all been a misunderstanding, that they'd move Max back to the living room, that I'd get my space back. But tomorrow came, and nothing changed. The worst part wasn't the loss of the room. It was what it meant. That Amanda saw me as disposable. That Dean, my sweet, thoughtful Dean, saw me as less important than a dog. Max barked at me the next morning when I went to pour myself a cup of tea. Amanda told him, "Good boy," then looked at me and added, "He's just protecting his space." His space. My home. They invited friends over that weekend. A casual brunch, Amanda said. I stayed in the guest room, not feeling up to pretending. But I heard her loud and clear, laughing in the kitchen. "This is Max's room now," she told someone. "We gave him the master. He deserves it. He's part of the family." There was laughter. Agreement. No one asked about me. No one even knocked on my door. That was the moment I stopped hoping. The moment something in me broke. Not with rage but with clarity. They didn't see me as family anymore. I wasn't someone they loved. I was someone they tolerated. A silent figure who paid bills and watched their child and stayed out of the way. And I realized something even more painful than the betrayal. I had let it happen. Slowly. Quietly. I had excused the comments, the dismissals, the entitlement, because I didn't want to lose them. But now? Now I'd already lost them. It was a Tuesday morning when I overheard them. I wasn't eavesdropping, just moving slow the way people my age do. I'd woken up early from a cramp in my hip and was on my way to the kitchen for tea when I heard Amanda's voice, sharp and clear, coming from the living room. "She won't fight it, Dean. She's too tired. You've seen her lately. Half the time she's asleep in that tiny room." I paused in the hallway just out of view, heart thudding in my chest. Dean's voice followed, quieter, uncertain. "It still feels wrong." Amanda let out a frustrated sigh. "We can't wait forever. The longer she stays, the harder it gets. You said yourself, if we want the equity before Sammy starts school, we have to move quickly." Equity. It hit me like a slap. They were talking about the house. "She already signed the paperwork years ago," Amanda continued. "All we need is to move her somewhere comfortable. I already toured a place in Brookside. They have shared rooms, but it's clean, quiet, and affordable." "Shared rooms?" Dean asked, hesitant. Amanda's voice dropped lower. "She'll be fine. They have activities. Bingo nights. She'll make friends." I clutched the wall to steady myself, the hallway spinning. They were planning to send me away. To a home. Not even my own room shared. My hands trembled. Not from fear. Not even from anger. From disbelief. After everything. After raising Dean alone. After paying off the mortgage with overtime shifts and grocery coupons. After sleepless nights and lonely mornings. They wanted me gone. Quietly. Neatly. Like packing up leftovers after dinner. I backed away before they could see me, returned to the guest room, and shut the door without a sound. My tea would have to wait. I sat on the edge of the cot, staring at my hands, trying to remember when they had turned so frail. When my body had started to betray me just like my son now had. That afternoon, Amanda acted like nothing had happened. She asked if I could watch Sammy while she ran errands. I nodded silently. Sammy smiled and gave me a crayon drawing. A picture of our house with a heart in the window. I swallowed the lump in my throat and told him it was beautiful. He didn't know. None of this was his fault. But that night as I tucked him in, he said something that made my heart twist. "Mommy says we're gonna live somewhere with a big yard. Will you come too, Granny?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just kissed his forehead and turned out the light. Later I stood in the kitchen, holding the drawing he gave me. I looked around, this house filled with my memories, my love, my sacrifices, and I felt a quiet burning resolve begin to take root. I went into the garage, dug through my boxes, found the tin with Dean's childhood notes. "I love you, Mommy." One read in shaky handwriting. Another said, "You're my hero." I sat there and cried. Not because I missed that little boy, but because I realized he was gone, and maybe had been for a long time. The next day I began watching, listening. I paid attention to how Amanda's tone changed when she talked to me versus how she spoke to her friends. How Dean always deferred to her when it came to decisions, even about my home. I noticed how the mail stopped coming in my name, how the utilities were now listed under Amanda's online accounts, how the home insurance had been quietly switched to a newer, cheaper policy without my signature. And then I found the papers. They were tucked away in the hallway desk drawer, the one I used to keep Harold's letters in. Amanda must have thought I couldn't get to it anymore with my cane. But I did. It was a preliminary application to Brookside Assisted Living. My full name, my birthday, recommended level of care, moderate. Under primary contacts, Dean's name was listed, not mine. The note at the bottom read, "Mother-in-law will likely require coaxing." Coaxing. Not conversation. Not consideration. Coaxing. I stared at that word for a long time. And that's when the flashbacks began. To Harold. To the night we moved in. To the way we slept side by side in that master bedroom, dreaming of the family we'd raise in this house. To the night he made me promise to protect what we'd built. "Don't let anyone take this from you, Joe." I remembered his voice. The way he touched my hand as he faded. The way he loved me without conditions. Without schemes. I realized I had already broken that promise. But I wasn't going to break it again. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off, thinking. Not of revenge. Not even of justice. Just of dignity. Of the piece of myself I'd lost along the way. They thought I was weak. Powerless. Too tired to fight. But they were wrong. I might be old. I might be slower. But I still knew how to protect what was mine. And I knew where to start. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I waited a few days before confronting them. I wanted to be calm, steady. Not the overly emotional version of myself they liked to dismiss. I spent those days tidying my boxes, organizing old papers, and reading through Harold's journals for strength. He used to write everything down, lists, thoughts, prayers. One entry stuck with me. Stand your ground, Joe. Even when they think you won't. On Friday afternoon I brewed a pot of tea. I laid out cookies. I even set out 3 mugs, knowing Amanda would never drink mine. Then I asked Dean to sit with me. He came reluctantly and Amanda followed, arms crossed before she even sat down. I didn't waste time. I found the Brookside application, I said softly, hands wrapped around my warm mug. I saw that you've been making plans behind my back. Dean's eyes widened, flickering between me and Amanda. She didn't even flinch. Mom, it's not like that. He began, but Amanda cut in. It's exactly like that, she said flatly. You need more care than we can provide. It's not fair to ask us to keep adjusting our lives when there are professionals who can help you. And Max, he needs structure too. I blinked. You're comparing my needs to the dog's? Amanda rolled her eyes. That's not what I said. Dean leaned forward. His voice lowered as if trying to defuse a bomb. Mom, we were going to talk to you. It's just you're not getting any younger. And this place is a lot to manage. I looked at him, really looked. The boy who once wept when I scraped my knee. The teenager who begged me to come to every school play, even when I was exhausted from working 2 jobs. And now this man. You're right, I said slowly. I am getting older. But I'm not helpless. I cook, I clean, I've raised your son. And I've paid for half the things you both take for granted. I didn't ask to be waited on. I only asked for respect. Dean opened his mouth, but I kept going. I gave up my bedroom. I watched you box my memories. I sat quietly while you turned my home into a showroom. But now you want to put me in a shared room in a nursing facility. And you didn't even have the decency to ask me first. Amanda snorted. We knew what the answer would be. That was her slip. Her mistake. Her mask slipping. Dean glanced at her, then back at me, uneasy. You knew what the answer would be, I repeated. So you planned around it. Silence stretched. The only sound was the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the tapping of Max's nails against the floor as he wandered past, oblivious. I stood up slowly, setting my mug down. I see everything clearly now. This house was never about family. Not for you two. It was about comfort, convenience, and control. Amanda stood too, her voice rising. You act like a victim, but you made this choice. You invited us in. I did, I agreed. I welcomed you. I trusted you. And you've treated me like a burden. Dean's voice cracked slightly. Mom, we just wanted to erase me quietly, I said. To disappear me from the home I built. Amanda scoffed. You're being dramatic. No, I said firmly. I'm being clear. That night I packed more than just boxes. I packed away the last of my denial. The next morning, while they were out grocery shopping, I called a lawyer friend Harold and I had known for decades, Gerald Moore. We hadn't spoken in years, but when he answered and heard my voice, he said, Joanna, what took you so long? I laughed, but it caught in my throat. I think I need help, Gerald. Not just legal. The kind of help where someone stands beside you so you don't fall. He came over the next day, bringing folders, documents, and a quiet kind of understanding. I showed him everything, my deed, the financial records, the Brookside forms. He didn't need much convincing. We'll fix this, he said. But you have to be ready. Because when it's done, there's no going back. I'm not going back, I told him. Not to silence. Not to crumbs of kindness. I signed the first documents that afternoon. My hands shook, but not from fear. From the weight of finally taking control. That night, as I lay on the hard cot, I allowed myself to imagine peace. Not revenge. Just peace. A home where I could choose who walked through the door. Where I didn't have to explain why I wanted to keep an old photo or a chipped mug. A home that felt like mine again. The next morning I walked to the post office, slowly, carefully, and mailed a few letters. One to Gerald with further instructions. One to an old friend who ran a women's transitional shelter. And one to myself. I don't know why. Maybe just to remember this moment. To feel like I was real again, not just background noise. As I slipped it into the slot, a woman exiting the post office held the door for me. She smiled. You have such lovely posture. You remind me of my grandmother. Longer existed. Gerald greeted me at his office like I'd never left. The place smelled like cedar and old books, just as it always had. He wore the same brown sweater vest he used to wear when he came to dinner during tax season. We'd always joked that if Harold had a brother, it would have been Gerald, calm, careful, and always 2 steps ahead. I don't take pleasure in this, I said quietly as he handed me the paperwork. Gerald looked over his glasses. You don't have to. You just have to be sure. I was. The new will was painfully clear. Everything, the house, the accounts, the bonds Harold had left tucked away in a fireproof box, would be donated to the Willow Path Women's Center upon my passing. The only exception. If the will was contested by any party, the entire estate would instead go to a rural literacy program in Harold's hometown. Dean's name no longer appeared. We added a letter of explanation, not required legally, but something I needed. In it, I wrote to Dean as his mother, not just a legal testator. I wrote about the dog bed, about the boxed-up memories, about Brookside, about trust once given freely now fractured beyond repair. It took me 3 tries to write that letter without shaking. I don't hate you, I wrote, but I cannot reward what you've become. I left out Amanda entirely. She didn't deserve even a sentence. As Gerald slid the signed documents into a folder, he placed his hand gently on mine. You're not alone, Joe. More people have done this than you'd think. You just don't hear about them, because most mothers can't bear the guilt. I feel it, I admitted. But I can't let it stop me. He nodded once. That's strength. Walking out of that office, I felt like a different woman. Not lighter exactly, but straighter, firmer. As if Harold were walking beside me, nodding in approval. I didn't tell Dean. Not yet. I wanted him to sit comfortably in his illusion of control. Let Amanda decorate with more paw print pillows. Let them host brunches and take photos with Max in holiday sweaters. Let them believe the house would soon be theirs. Let them choke on their entitlement. In the meantime, I began to make small, quiet changes. I called the Willow Path Women's Center. Asked for the director. I explained who I was, what I was planning, and why. There was silence on the line for a moment before she said, We've never had someone offer something like this. Are you sure? Yes, I said. I need this place to mean something again. Not just a home but a haven. She said she'd come by the next week. To see the space. To talk. To dream. I stood in the living room after that call, running my hand along the edge of the old fireplace. Harold had built it himself, laid each brick in the middle of a sweltering July. I could almost hear his voice. It'll stand longer than we will, Joe. That's the point. Now it would stand for women like me. Women who gave and were forgotten anyway. That evening I watched Dean laugh at something Amanda said over dinner. They didn't notice that I wasn't eating. Didn't notice the way I looked at the walls, the floor. The worn spots in the carpet from years of pacing with a crying baby or worried thoughts. They thought I had nothing left to give. But they were wrong. They had taken what they could see, space, comfort, the illusion of ownership. But the soul of this house? The heart? That still belonged to me. Later that night, I heard Amanda on a video call in the next room. We're expecting the transfer to happen soon, she said, her voice sugary for the camera. It's my husband's family property. We've been managing it for years anyway. She laughed. No, it's not officially ours yet, but we're not worried. His mom's basically moved out of the way. I smiled in the darkness. Let them think that. Let them get comfortable. Because the truth was no longer a weapon they held over me. It was the quiet key I now held in my hand. I think part of me still hoped they'd change. Maybe not apologize, maybe not undo what they'd done, but just see me again. Recognize that I was still here. Still breathing. Still the woman who raised Dean with nothing but grit and prayer. But what happened next made it clear. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me gone. It started with the closet. I'd gone to the guest room, my room now, though it never felt like mine, to look for Harold's old flannel shirt. I kept it tucked away behind some of my photo albums, the scent of his cologne still clinging to the collar. But when I opened the closet, I was met with a padlock. I blinked, thinking it must have been a mistake. I tried the handle again. Still locked. I stepped into the hallway and called out, Dean? Amanda. Amanda came up from the basement, brushing dust off her leggings. Oh, that. Yeah. We needed more space for Max's winter gear. It's just temporary. My hands shook. That's my closet. Amanda tilted her head like I'd said something foolish. Technically, it's the house's closet. We're all sharing space here, Joe. It's about balance. I walked back into the room and sat on the edge of the cot. My heart was thudding. I felt like I'd been pushed just 1 inch closer to the edge. The next morning, I went to the kitchen to make toast. My box of chamomile tea, Harold's favorite, was gone, replaced with a container labeled Max's Supplements. I opened the cabinet to find more dog products, treats, ointments, probiotics, where my spices used to be. That night, Amanda announced over dinner, by the way, we'll be having a few guests over Saturday. A networking event. Influencer types. We're finally going to build Max's brand properly. I stared at her. His brand. Dean smiled like a proud father. He already has over 2,000 followers. We've been working on content for weeks. He's going to be the face of a pet wellness company. Amanda chimed in. We're hoping to pitch the house as our content studio. Rustic but polished. Very farm chic grandma aesthetic. I blinked. Farm chic grandma? She waved her hand. You don't have to do anything. Just stay in your room while we film. We'll even bring you a plate afterward. Something in me went still. Quiet. That Saturday I stayed in my room as instructed. But not because they told me to. Because I was ready. Ready for the final straw to land. And it did. Hours after the event, I stepped into the hallway to grab some water. Laughter echoed from the living room, and I saw people, strangers, lounging on my furniture. Someone was wearing my knitted throw blanket like a shawl. A woman posed beside Max, holding a branded sign that said, "This is his house now." I turned away, walked past the kitchen where Amanda was handing out drinks, describing the house layout like it was hers. He's getting older, she said casually, so we're just modernizing it a bit. Clean lines. Open concept. We want it to be ready when we officially take ownership. Didn't your mother-in-law live here? Someone asked. Amanda sipped her wine. She still does. For now. For now. That night, I sat at the kitchen table after everyone had left. The smell of wine, dog biscuits, and perfume still lingered. I stared at the table's scratches. The ones Dean made with his fork when he was 5 and didn't want to eat carrots. The ones Harold left when he built Sammy's toy box right there in the dining room. They didn't remember any of that. And now they never would. I went to the garage and pulled out a locked box. Inside were all my documents. The updated will. The property deed. Copies of the trust account Gerald helped me set up. Letters of transfer to Willow Path. Ready to go the moment I gave the word. I placed everything into a neat folder, then wrote one final note to Dean. Short. Measured. Honest. There comes a point, my son, when silence is no longer grace, it's surrender. I gave you a home. You gave my pet to a dog. So now I'm giving this house to someone who remembers what a home should feel like. Then I sealed it and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. That night I didn't cry. I packed my suitcase quietly. Just a few things, my husband's shirt, Sammy's drawing, and the last of my tea. Then I set my alarm for early the next morning. Because I had one more place to be before I finished this. I wore Harold's flannel shirt that morning. It still held the faintest scent of cedar and thyme, and it made me feel strong-rooted, like the oak trees he loved so much. I brushed my hair, pinned it back neatly, and put on a pair of earrings I hadn't worn in years. The kind that said, "I'm not here to be dismissed." Amanda's influencer brunch was already in full swing when I stepped out of the guest room. I could hear the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the performative squeals. Max barked every few seconds, clearly overwhelmed, but no one paid him any mind. I walked slowly, cane in hand, into the living room. The chatter began to fade when they saw me. Amanda looked up, her face tightening. "Mom, I told you we had company. You should be resting." Dean stood beside her, holding a tray of pastries. He looked surprised, maybe even guilty, but said nothing. "I won't stay long," I said calmly. "Just wanted to give you all a little story. A real one. About this house." There were at least 15 people in the room, young, overdressed, all clinging to wine glasses and phones, unsure what to do. I didn't give them time to react. This house was built on sweat and sacrifice. My husband, Harold, laid those fireplace bricks himself. I raised my son in this living room, right there where you've set your selfie ring light. I worked 2 jobs to make sure he had everything he needed. I gave up vacations, clothes, even meals sometimes to keep this roof solid. Someone chuckled nervously. Amanda started to speak, but I raised a hand. "Dean," I said, locking eyes with my son. "Do you remember when I gave you this house key on your 25th birthday?" He nodded slowly. "You told me you'd protect this place. That it was our legacy." His face began to crumple, but he didn't speak. I turned to the crowd. "I came home from the hospital a few weeks ago and found my bedroom, given to a dog. My bed gone. My belongings boxed up like trash. And I said nothing because I hoped that love would be enough." The room was silent now. Even Max had stopped barking. But then I found out they planned to send me to a nursing home. Without asking me. Without discussing it. Just erase me. Quietly. A few gasped. Someone set down their mimosa. I pulled the folder from my bag and held it up. "This is my will. Updated. Finalized. Witnessed. Notarized. Effective immediately." Amanda's face turned pale. "This house is no longer going to Dean. Not 1 cent. Every asset, every bond, every piece of what Harold and I built. It's been reassigned." "To who?" Amanda spat, suddenly furious. "Your church? One of your old bingo friends." I smiled faintly. "To the Willow Path Women's Center. A place that helps women rebuild after they've been made to feel invisible. Just like I was." Amanda's jaw dropped. Dean took a step forward, voice shaking. "Mom, please don't do this. You're upset. We can talk about this." I looked at him, that grown man I no longer recognized, and said quietly, "I begged you to see me. You looked away. I begged you to protect this home. You gave my room to a dog. And when you thought I wasn't watching, you tried to erase me." Amanda hissed, "You can't do this. We live here. Our son lives here." I turned to her, calm as ever. "You'll need to find a new place then. I've given you enough time, Amanda. More than you ever gave me." Dean looked like he might cry. "What about Sammy?" My voice softened. He's the only one who still sees me. And I'll never close my heart to him. But you, Dean, you made a choice. 100 little choices. And this is the consequence. I didn't wait for their response. I turned to the guests who stared at me in stunned silence. You can finish your wine, I said gently. But you'll be posting from someone else's house next time. Then I walked out the front door. I heard Amanda shouting behind me, Dean calling after me. But I didn't stop. I walked down the driveway, the morning sun warming my face. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to argue. Because I'd already won. Do you think the mother made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house was quiet when I returned later that evening. I'd spent the day with Gerald, finalizing the transition paperwork. He insisted on buying me lunch, meatloaf and mashed potatoes at a quiet diner off Main Street. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He knew what that confrontation had cost me, and what it had freed me from. When I walked through the front door, the living room was spotless. Too spotless. The ring light was gone. So were the pastries, the branded signs, the fake cheer. Even Max was nowhere to be seen. Amanda didn't come out of her room. Dean did, but just stood at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor. I walked past him without a word. In the kitchen, I boiled water for tea. Not chamomile, something stronger. Ginger and lemon. I stood there, letting the steam wash over me, feeling the weight of the past weeks slide off my shoulders like a coat I no longer needed to carry. I took my cup to the porch. For the first time in months, I sat in my old chair. The one Amanda had pushed into the garage. I dragged it back in before leaving for Gerald's office that morning, even though it made my arms ache. It belonged here. Just like I did. The neighborhood buzzed faintly in the background, sprinklers ticking, birds chirping, the occasional car rolling by. A few neighbors slowed down when they saw me. One gave a small wave. Another, a woman I barely knew, paused at the edge of the sidewalk. I heard what happened, she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. Already? It's a small town, she shrugged. People talk. I nodded, unsure how to respond. She hesitated. Good for you, Mrs. Collins. Most women would have just taken it. I gave a small smile. I did take it. For years. Then I stopped. She nodded and walked on. That night, the house felt heavier, but not with sorrow. With memory. I walked room to room, running my hands along door frames and windowsills. I opened the boxes they had packed away in the garage, carefully unwrapping photos, quilts, books. I brought back my wedding photo and set it on the mantel. Put Harold's work boots by the back door, right where they used to rest after a long day in the garden. No one stopped me. The next morning, Amanda was gone. I found a note on the counter, sharp and bitter. I won't live under a roof where I'm not respected. We'll be staying with friends until we figure out our next steps. I hope you enjoy your lonely victory. I folded the note without emotion. Dean lingered a little longer. 2 more days to be exact. We barely spoke. He avoided my gaze at breakfast. He took calls outside. At night, I heard him pacing the hallway. On the second morning, I found him sitting on the porch with Max. I'm sorry, he said without looking at me. I didn't respond. He ran a hand through his hair. You blindsided us. I sipped my tea. You started planning my exit months ago. You just didn't expect me to plan my own. He flinched. I don't know how it got this bad, he said quietly. I do, I said. You stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as a problem. He shook his head, eyes wet. It wasn't supposed to go like this. But it did. He looked at me finally. Really looked. What do I do now? I sighed. You find somewhere to live. You take care of your son. You do better. He nodded slowly. Can I call you sometime? I studied him for a long moment. We'll see. Then I stood, went inside, and closed the door behind me. He left that afternoon. For the first time in years, the house was mine again. No barking dog. No eye-rolling daughter-in-law. No child who had forgotten who built the very floor beneath his feet. The silence was deafening that first evening, but also comforting. I made myself a proper dinner. Roasted vegetables, a bit of chicken, Harold's favorite cornbread. I played an old record while I cooked, something soft and scratchy and full of memories. After dinner, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter to Sammy. You are kind and curious and good. I will always be here for you. Always. No matter where you are or what your parents decide. You'll always have a room in this house. Because that's what family does, we keep the light on for each other. I didn't know if they'd let him read it. But I had to write it anyway. Later I took a walk through the backyard. The roses had been neglected. Leaves browning, petals fallen. I knelt by the oldest bush, the one Harold planted on our 10th anniversary, and trimmed it carefully. Let's bring you back, I whispered. As I worked, I felt something I hadn't in months. Purpose. Peace. Not because I had punished anyone, but because I had remembered myself. I was no longer just a mother or a grandmother or a quiet guest in someone else's life. I was Joanna Collins, and this was my home. The first few mornings alone were the hardest. I'd wake up instinctively listening for Sammy's footsteps, Max's nails tapping against the floor, Amanda's voice humming some off-key pop song. But there was nothing. Just the creak of the old pipes and the soft chirp of birds outside the window. It wasn't loneliness. Not exactly. It was the space left behind when noise is no longer filling every corner. The echo of a house returning to itself. But after a week, that silence became a canvas. One morning I walked through the hallway and stopped in front of the bedroom door. My door, the one that had once been Harold's and mine, then Max's and now empty again. I opened it slowly, taking in the smell of lavender I'd sprayed the night before. The dog mattress was gone. I donated it to the animal shelter. I wasn't spiteful about it, just ready to let go. The room felt bigger than I remembered. I stood in the center and closed my eyes. What do I do now, Harold? I whispered. What do I do with all this space? The next day, Willow Path's director came to visit. Her name was Elise. Sharp eyes, soft voice, and hands that moved like she'd carried 100 burdens for other people. She looked around the house with a quiet awe, touching the banisters, the windowsills, the old wallpaper patterns. I can feel the years in here, she said. It's like the walls remember. They do, I said. Every dent, every creak has a story. We sat in the living room with tea. She asked why I wanted to give the house to the shelter. I told her the truth. I spent my life giving, I said. To my husband. To my son. I don't regret that. But when I needed love back, when I needed dignity, no one offered it. I don't want other women to feel that kind of erasure. Not here. Elise nodded slowly. What do you want this place to be? I didn't hesitate. A home. Not a shelter. Not a stopover. A home. For women starting over. For mothers who need safety. For grandmothers raising grandchildren. For the invisible ones. She looked around and smiled. We can make that happen. And just like that, the next chapter began. We started small. That weekend, I began sorting through the rooms, clearing closets, airing out old linens, scrubbing window panes. It was exhausting work, but it filled me with a kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. The kind of tired that comes after doing something that matters. Volunteers from Willow Path came by every few days. Women from all walks of life, young, old, single mothers, retirees, even a few teenagers doing community service. One of them, a woman named Rosalie, brought homemade scones and refused to let me mop the floors. You've done enough cleaning in your life, she said with a wink. Sit down and boss me around. I laughed harder than I had in months. The community started noticing. One neighbor stopped by with paint samples. Another brought extra chairs for the porch. The woman who'd paused to speak to me that first week returned with gardening gloves and helped me replant the roses with fresh soil. The house came alive in a new way. Not through noise but through purpose. I set up one of the upstairs bedrooms as a playroom, Sammy's old toys cleaned and ready. Another became a reading room with Harold's books, the ones Amanda had boxed up and left to mold in the garage. There were moments, of course, when I questioned it. When I sat in the quiet, hands sore, heart aching, wondering if I'd done too much too fast. But then I'd hear laughter from the hallway. Or someone would call me Miss Joe with a smile. Or I'd walk past a room and see a mother cradling her child, humming softly, safe in a place she didn't know existed weeks ago. That's when I'd remember. This was exactly what Harold would have wanted. Make it count. He told me once, years before he got sick. Whatever you do, make it count. And now I was I got a letter from Sammy in the mail one afternoon. In crooked handwriting it said, "I miss you, Granny. Mom says we can't come back, but I think she's wrong. You're the best." It was signed with a heart and a drawing of Max wearing sunglasses. I held it to my chest and cried. Then I hung it on the refrigerator where every woman who walked through that kitchen could see it. A reminder that love still lived here. That family, real family, wasn't just blood. It was honesty, kindness, loyalty. One afternoon, Elise returned with 2 women and a toddler. "They need somewhere stable," she said quietly. "Just for a while." I led them to the room I'd once called mine. It had fresh sheets, curtains I'd sewn years ago, and a photo of a blooming rosebush on the nightstand. "It's yours now," I said gently. The woman blinked back tears. "You're giving me a bedroom?" I smiled. "No. I'm giving you a beginning." By the 3rd month, the house didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. Felt bigger than me. Fuller. There was always something happening. A child's laughter echoing down the hall, the clatter of someone cooking in the kitchen, soft music from the back porch where 2 of the women liked to sit and crochet together. It wasn't chaotic. It was alive. We didn't call it the shelter. We called it home. And it was. 6 women lived with me now. Some came with children. Some came with nothing but a backpack and a story too heavy for their shoulders. They each had their own room, but we shared everything else. Chores, meals, long talks over tea at the kitchen table. I hadn't felt so seen, so useful in decades. One afternoon, Rosalie came in with a tray of lemon bars and plopped into the chair beside me. "You know what you've done here, Joe? I've baked too many casseroles." She laughed. "You made a family without using a single drop of blood." That stuck with me, because it was true. Every woman in that house had been cast aside by someone who once called them family. And yet, within these walls, we created something stronger than blood. A chosen family. One built on shared pain, mutual respect, and quiet moments of care. One evening, I was sweeping the front porch when a small voice behind me said, "Granny Joe." I turned and there he was, Sammy. He looked taller, older than I remembered, but his eyes were the same. Wide, warm, searching for something familiar. He held out a folded piece of paper. I opened it and read his scrawled message. "Mom said not to come. Dad said it was complicated. But I missed you. And I wanted to see your house." I dropped the broom and hugged him before I could stop myself. He melted into my arms, and for a moment, I forgot everything that had led us here. I only felt love. Pure and simple. He stayed for the afternoon. We made cookies and I let him stir the batter like he used to. He peeked into every room, waving shyly to the women and their children. One of the toddlers, a curly-haired girl named Ava, ran up to him and offered a crayon. He took it and colored with her at the kitchen table for nearly an hour. As the sun began to set, I sat beside him on the porch swing. "Do you like it here?" I asked. He nodded. "It feels happy." I smiled. "It is. Is it still your house?" I thought about that for a moment, then shook my head. "No, sweet boy. It's our house now. For anyone who needs it." He looked down at his hands, then whispered, "I think Mom's mad about that." "I know. I don't think she understands. Maybe she doesn't want to." He leaned his head against my shoulder. "I'm glad you didn't go to that place. The one with the shared rooms." I blinked back tears. "Me too." Before he left, I gave him a notebook and told him he could write to me anytime. I promised I'd write back. He smiled. "Will you still be here?" "As long as the house stands," I said. And I meant it. After he left, the other women gathered around, asking about him gently. "Your grandson?" one asked. "Yes," I said. "He still remembers me." Rosalie patted my shoulder. "He will. Kids know who their real people are." That night I sat on the back steps watching the porch light flicker. I remembered Harold building that light fixture, cursing the wiring while Dean sat nearby handing him tools. He was so patient then, so eager to learn. Maybe one day he'd find his way back. Maybe not. Either way I had peace. The house was no longer haunted by what I had lost, but warmed by what I had created. Every Thursday evening we had family dinner. Everyone cooked something. We put all the tables together and shared stories, laughter, and second helpings. Sometimes Elise came by with new women. Sometimes a neighbor dropped off bread or flowers. And slowly, the house became something of a legend around town. Marjorie's house. People began calling it. Not Joanna's. Not the Collins home. But Marjorie's, named after my mother. A woman who raised 6 children with her hands and her heart. A woman who used to say, "Family is who holds your hand when the world lets go." I couldn't give Dean a second chance at childhood. But I could give someone else a second chance at everything. One evening, after the dishes were done and the kids were tucked in, Rosalie sat beside me with her knitting. "You miss him?" she asked softly. I didn't need to ask who she meant. "Yes," I said. "Every day." "But you don't regret this, do you?" I looked around. At the house. At the people inside. At the peace blooming in every corner. "No," I whispered. "Not even a little. Because in the end, blood doesn't build a home. Love does. And this house, our house, was overflowing with it." It was a Sunday afternoon when I saw his car. I recognized it the moment it turned the corner. Still that same dull gray sedan, tires a bit too worn, headlights fogged with time. I was pruning the roses in the front yard when it slowed, idled for a second, and then pulled into the driveway. Dean stepped out slowly, dressed in slacks and a tucked-in shirt like he was coming from church or trying too hard to look respectful. I didn't move from the rosebush. Just kept trimming, letting the quiet speak first. "Hi, Mom," he said finally, his voice rough with nerves. I straightened, wiped my hands on my apron and looked at him. He looked thinner. Tired. The lines on his face deeper than I remembered. But he still had Harold's eyes, and that was what hurt the most. "I didn't think I'd see you again," I said. He looked down. "I didn't think I'd have the nerve." I nodded once. "So what brought you here?" He shifted on his feet, opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally he said, "Sammy cried for 2 days after he visited you. He said it was the first place he'd felt happy in a long time." My heart clenched, but I didn't let it show. I thought maybe I'd come by. Say what I should have said a long time ago. I crossed my arms gently. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. For everything. For Amanda, for the bedroom. For the way I didn't stand up for you. I thought I was doing what was best for my family. I didn't realize I was destroying the only family that ever mattered." I looked at him for a long, quiet moment, then motioned toward the porch. "Sit. I won't promise forgiveness, but I'll hear you out." He followed me, sat down carefully on the wooden swing. I poured him a glass of water from the pitcher on the side table. We sat in silence for a moment, the breeze rustling through the trees. He looked around the yard. "It looks better than it has in years. That's what happens when people love a place again," I said softly. He nodded. "I've thought about what I'd say," he continued. "Rehearsed it in my head a dozen times. But standing here now, all I can think to say is, you were right. About all of it." I took a sip of my tea, letting the words settle between us. He sighed. "I don't expect you to change the will. I'm not here for that. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. How blind I was. How much you gave." I looked out at the garden, not ready to meet his eyes. "You hurt me, Dean. Not just with what you did, but with how easy it was for you to do it. You let them treat me like furniture. Like I was in the way." "I know," he said, voice cracking. "And I'll never stop being ashamed of that." I nodded, still watching the rosebush. "Shame is a start. But change is what matters." "I've left Amanda," he said suddenly. She didn't want to compromise. Didn't want to admit she'd gone too far. Couldn't. I couldn't keep raising Sammy in that kind of coldness. That surprised me. "He asks about you all the time," Dean added. "He keeps that notebook you gave him under his pillow. Said it smells like your house." I felt my eyes sting, but I didn't cry. "Not yet. I won't ever ask to come back," he said. "I don't deserve to. I just want Sammy to have you in his life. If you'll have him." I turned to face him fully. "This house isn't for second chances, Dean. It's for new beginnings. And sometimes those two things look the same, but they're not. I built something here that's bigger than my pain. Bigger than what you took." He nodded, quietly taking that in. "But Sammy is always welcome. He has his own mug in the kitchen. His own drawer in the playroom." Dean looked down again. "I miss you, Mom." I didn't say it back. but I reached for his hand and gave it a squeeze. We sat like that for a long while. No promises. No erasing of what had been done, but an understanding. And in that small gesture, one mother's hand in her son's, something unspoken passed between us. A closing of one door. And the quiet possibility of another. He stood, eventually thanked me again and walked to his car. He didn't ask to stay. And I didn't offer. But I watched him drive away with something that almost felt like peace. Later that evening, I lit a candle in the living room. It was something Harold and I used to do when we were thinking of someone far away. I whispered his name into the glow, then added a second. Dean. Not in anger, but in memory, in hope, in a way that only a mother can. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Share your story in the comments. 6 months later, the house was ready. The porch had been repainted a soft robin's egg blue, the same shade Harold once described as the color of calm mornings. The windows were polished, flower beds blooming with late summer marigolds and sunflowers. Inside, the walls held laughter, the scent of fresh bread, and stories that would never make it into courtrooms or memoirs, but mattered more than either. And the sign out front now read Marjorie's house. We unveiled it at the dedication ceremony. A small wooden plaque with carved lettering and a hand-painted vine that wrapped gently around the border. I stood beside Elise as she gave the opening speech. Her voice trembled slightly when she said, "This house was not given in bitterness. It was given in purpose. It is a gift born of survival, of wisdom, and of choosing to turn pain into sanctuary." People clapped. I didn't. I just looked at the porch, at the window where Harold's chair once sat, and whispered to myself, we did it. Dozens of people came to the dedication. Neighbors, volunteers, donors, and women who had once lived here and now lived better because of it. Even the mayor showed up, gave a short speech about community resilience, and tried not to tear up when one of the toddlers waddled over and handed him a dandelion. Sammy was there too. Dean had asked if he could bring him, and I'd said yes. Amanda didn't come. She'd moved out of town, from what I heard. That part of the story no longer belonged to me. Sammy wore a little bow tie and ran up to hug me the moment he arrived. "Is it really your house forever now?" he asked. I knelt and looked him in the eye. "It's everyone's house now. But yes, it'll always be mine too." He handed me a picture he'd drawn. Our house with lots of windows and lots of hearts. In the corner, he'd written Granny Joe's house of nice people. I framed it later that night and hung it in the hallway outside what used to be my bedroom. There were speeches that day. Poems. A young woman named Mira read something she'd written about surviving domestic violence and finding safety under this roof. Her baby girl giggled from a stroller while she read. I'd held that baby the first night they arrived. She had colic and wouldn't stop crying until I sang her an old lullaby my mother used to hum to me. When the crowd clapped, Mira looked at me and said, "You gave me back my life." I had to step inside for a moment after that. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my heart was so full it needed a quiet moment to hold everything inside. In the kitchen, Rosalie was handing out lemonade and lemon bars, greeting everyone like they were long-lost cousins. "Careful," she told one man with a grin. "You eat too many of those and you'll end up volunteering full-time." She winked at me as I passed. "Still think this was a mistake?" "Not even for a second," I said. That evening, after the crowd thinned and the laughter faded to murmurs, I stood at the edge of the porch and watched the sunset dip behind the trees. It painted the house in gold, every corner glowing like it had been waiting for this all along. Dean came over slowly, holding Sammy's hand. He didn't say much, just stood beside me. "I drove by the old neighborhood today," he said quietly. "It didn't feel like home anymore." "It's not," I replied gently. He nodded. "But this does. Even if it's not mine." "It never was about ownership, Dean. It was about respect. And care. You gave that away." "I know," he said. "But Sammy sees it. And maybe someday he'll help build something like this too." I looked down at my grandson, who was humming to himself and swinging our hands back and forth. "Maybe he already is," I whispered. Dean turned to go, but before he left he said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." I smiled. "I'm proud of me too." When the sun disappeared, I walked back inside. The house was still buzzing gently. Dishes being washed, bedtime stories being read, soft footsteps on hardwood floors. I walked past the living room where Harold's photo sat on the mantel, framed in wood. I lit a candle beside it, like we used to do when we needed guidance or gratitude. I sat down in the armchair facing him and folded my hands. I kept the promise, Harold, I whispered. I protected what we built. I let it live again. And I made sure it meant something. I closed my eyes and imagined him smiling. Not the young version. Not the one from our wedding photos or those early Christmases. The older Harold. The one with tired eyes and soft hands. The one who told me, even in sickness, don't let them forget who you are. They didn't. As I didn't. I stayed. I fought. I chose peace. And I gave our home the ending it deserved.